Hi folks, Aaron from PubSafe, and today this is going to be a video that is edited to take out some of the chitter chatter that was going on in the presentation, but wanted to provide this presentation to you so you can have a look at, in general, what are the functions of the PubSafe platform, why might you want to look at PubSafe for your organization, and really what are those benefits that PubSafe can bring to your organization compared to some of the other systems. Have a listen and enjoy, and if you got any questions or comments, post them below and we'll get back to you. Thank you.
All right, real quick from our website, we got a ton of stuff. Everybody that needs to use it can go up and hit login. When you log in, the first thing that you're going to see is our map. The platform works globally, so if you dispatch a team to Africa, go to respond to a famine or a flood or something like that, you can track the people anywhere in the world that has internet service, through the cell phones, right? I'm super glad to see and hear more about the cell phones starting to get satellite connectivity. It'll certainly open up things and be a game changer in disaster response, so everybody doesn't have to go to custom comms. It'll open up the ability to use things like mobile apps and things like that when traditional land-based cell towers are going to be down. So we recognize that. In the platform itself, everybody can see those people that decide to share their location. It can be people that have recently responded, or there's other people that you can go, your user goes off the map after a certain amount of time, so you just don't remain visible forever. We can see places like Puerto Rico slowly adding more users. These are like active users that have somewhat done something in the last 90 days. But the interesting thing about PubSafe, it's not just for disasters, right? Being in Tampa, we've all heard of the party barge that's crossing the bay and sinks, right? I started to get into this for non-emergency disasters when I had a boat, my battery died, and it cost me $350 to get a jump. If I had just something like PubSafe, I could have broadcast, "Hey, I need some help," and somebody would have, in a nearby boat that had PubSafe would have come over and give me a jump start. I think back to the
Hey,
NFL. You can get in here and you can drill down on anybody that's out here that's sharing their information. This icon here it's a little asterisk that represents somebody that is in responder status. You can pull their information right up here. You can see what they're saying that they can do. Like, hey, I've got these skills, I've got these resources, and I can be deployed in 12 hours or less, or 12 hours or more, right? That's their deployment time. This is the information that we're capturing when someone says, I want to be a responder in the mobile app, and they've got to fill out some more information. And they don't actually get associated with anybody at that point. They just simply say, hey, I am somebody that you could potentially call on if you had a help request in my area and nobody else was available, even though I'm not attached to your organization as of yet, right? And then obviously we give location, click to call, and then duty status is, are they on duty? Are they looking to take missions and be tasked with something? Or are they on a call? Are they off duty? Are they en route? Things like that. So you could actually see responders coming. If everybody was on the same pane of glass, you'd actually be able to see the teams that are coming from other geographic areas as they're moving into a disaster area and be able to better coordinate and facilitate, their deployment. That status information is super important. And then you can message and chat with these people, or you can add them to a user group, kind of like on the fly type stuff. So that's a responder. And then you can go in here and you can find, here's like a regular user that's shared their location, and they didn't provide much information because you can use false names, but we do connect you to an email address. We don't do SMS valid verification yet, but you have to have a valid phone number. So, there is some tie to that. We need a minimal amount of accountability with this type of platform. But
what's all the
I'm more
numbers?
like,
What's the numbers represent? 10, 87, 24?
those are just people. Those are in a cluster. That's as you zoom in, that cluster opens up, so you can see how many are in that particular location, right? So
Gotcha.
there's two people there. Just a way of organizing the visual information that you have. So I'm, being military, I'm all into maps. I think map visualization is such a huge piece of everything that we need to be able to do to properly respond to any type of event. So we put a lot of time and effort into that. We also integrated weather into this because obviously field teams are super subject to weather conditions that are out there, storms that are coming, maybe the follow-on hurricane or the tornado that's coming through the second band. And we need to be able to watch that on behalf of the people that are actually working in the field. So, and then the other piece is you can message anybody in an organization anywhere in the world, right? But you can only message your organization members. And It is almost instantaneous to message somebody that's out there. You can click on the map and then you can determine how you want to select somebody. So if there was and I've got examples of this in pictures on the website. Let's say this storm front here was coming through, right? And you wanted to warn the people just in front of the storm. You could create a polygon, or you could do a corridor, which is kind of cool, right? You can, yeah, you can go like this, and then you can say, okay, I'm done, and I'm going to message those people, and it's going to come back and it's going to give me a list of all those users that are there. Now, because none of these people are connected to my organization, it's going to tell me I can't do this. But if I was in the Tampa area, I can bring up a message window and I could message everybody almost instantaneously, in my area. And we've got templates and things like that you can use as an organization. I can actually, and I do message everybody in the world, once a month typically is what I try to do. Just send out a broadcast message to everybody that says, hey, this is a monthly test, keep PubSafe on their minds, and hope that they, share and think about how PubSafe could potentially impact their communities. So I've got special tools that allows me to do that, but we can message massive numbers of people because it's going to our mobile app through the internet. We can do speeds and quantities that would take hours and hours to do through like an SMS platform, and it would cost a bloody fortune, right? So messaging is a big piece of that. Here's the contact manager that we created with lots of abilities to filter the users by skill sets, what country they're in, their experience levels, right? These are the 4 experience levels that we collect. And you'll understand why we do this, because when we get to the dispatching side, what we're doing is using some logic to try to find the person that has the skills and the experience and the resources that's closest to the help request. So we're making suggestions to the dispatchers so they don't have to go through a list of 50 people. The ones that they're most likely going to be able to work with are the ones that are at the top of the list, right? And then we also take into account what is their mission status, right? Are they mission available, or are they tied up doing a mission right now? Because you can't run 2 missions at the same time. So you don't need to waste time contacting people that are already occupied running a mission, right? So let's see, I'll just open up Daryl, show you what we got inside as far as like contact manager information goes. All the basics up here. Then we get into some more information down here. This is the roles, the year, some of that information that we need for just general accountability. Address, what assets does Daryl have? Amphibious vehicle shirt, right? So that's what he listed. Any emergency contacts in case he was to get hurt in the field. Any photos, like profile photos you could do, or if you wanted to upload a photo of the vehicle that they're driving, in case somebody called about a strange vehicle. And then we can also add training and certificates to the equation to kind of keep track of, when are things going to expire, so we can stay up to date with the state and the feds, that type of thing.
So it's a team management tool.
Yeah.
Is really what it is. Okay.
Yeah, we've got that. And then also we have a global directory too, it's a subsection of the contact manager where anybody in the world can put in their contact information. Let's say you're, Hillsborough County EOC, you would want to go in there and put your information in there. So if we had a disaster and people moved to this area, they could go into the directory and they would know who to contact in the area, because EOC's in there, the sheriff's office is in there, the police, the, emergency medical service, whatever. People don't have to search and guess for who they need to be in contact with and coordinate with to be more effective when they arrive on scene. Okay. The dispatching piece, and I did this just before we got on the call, I created a little help request, and I just went into the app and I said, hey, look, I need, and I just entered a pretty generic help request here. So it shows up in this multi-step process, right? So I can see it here, I can review it, I can click to call this person, which happens a lot. Hey, I'm not sure of what you're telling me, or I'm not sure of where you are. I didn't get GPS coordinates from your phone for some reason. Can you give me an address? I need to call them. So we're trying to make that time and effort between information and communication as short as possible. And everything we do is click to call, click to email, click to SMS, click to copy. Making each one of those little tiny steps better. Because if you're running 50 help requests at one time, every click counts in that process, right? So I can then zoom in and filter, who I potentially want to be looking at. is it qualified, is it pending, or is it unqualified? And then I can move it from, a particular, just this list here. And this list might have 50, 100, or 1,000 help requests that have come in, right? I can qualify it and I can move it to a work order. And at that point, then I have to start looking for who's in that area that I can then start reaching out to, right? And that's where the mapping comes into play, and being able to filter down the information in the map. I don't want to see everybody. I just want to see, people that are organization members only. So I can deselect that, and I can go in and I can say, hey, just show me my organization members, and I can apply the changes, and it takes it out. And there's only 3 or 4 of us in this area right now that are in this little demo account, right? So then I can look and say, okay, now I understand where my opportunities are. Let me go ahead and send this out. It comes out to the mobile app. We either accept or reject it, and then we return it, right? So we've got these different choices, and nobody's in responder status, which is interesting, because you'd have to be in a responder status. Even though you're with an organization, you don't have to stay in responder status if you don't want to, right? So it gets pretty complicated and complex, but that level of is necessary to handle the scenarios that we've been given NGOs over the years of how do we facilitate this process, right? Not that it can't be better and doesn't need some adjustments here and there, but in general, the workflow is there to get those assignments out to people. I think the missing piece intact for me is there's no real communication with the people that need the help, right? I mean, you've got to collect that help information, you've got to onboard that help information somehow and get it into your system. And
Correct.
we essentially automated that process. We created custom forms. So you could take this help request, and every organization gets their own help request, custom URL. You can put that in social media on your website. And when somebody fills that out, it goes straight into our system, into the dispatching center as a pending help request, right? So you don't have to touch anything. You don't have to take anything over the phone. You can, if you want to, you can take it over the phone. You can also onboard volunteers the exact same way. And this ties into, how do you handle an impromptu search with a couple hundred people that show up? Well, you share a QR code to your form, and then we put those straight into the PubSafe portal. And to your point, Mike, by collecting that information, I can now market to you. I can call on you the next time I need manpower. I can solicit you for fundraising. Whatever those things are, I now have all that information, and I didn't have to do anything other than share a QR code with you or a URL as a web address, right? So we've made the ability to onboard or accept help requests exponentially faster than even what a 911 center can do, because we've all heard of the 911 centers. They get overwhelmed and they can't take any more. Nobody can get through. Well, that's just, that type of thing generally doesn't happen when you're talking about web-based, contact forms, essentially. And then, just as why we're here, we also created a damage assessment, which is based on FEMA's damage assessment documentation. It's not an official, damage assessment, but the idea is that we're going to collect information, whether it's crowdsourced or it could be done by an NGO. And that information is going to be made available through the mapping, because you can come in here and you can filter the map to show, like, the different things that we collect. I thought damage assessment was on here, but it's listed in here. We can go to the damage report and we can pull up the map and we can look at damage assessments on the map. So now at the EOC, I haven't had to send my people out there to go do those damage assessments. I can look at unofficial damage assessments, because they're going to have opinions and they're going to have photos and videos that go along with that. So I'm painting a picture of what's going on before I've ever had to put boots on the ground to see exactly what's happening there. Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. The search and rescue tracking, is pretty unique. And again, I think, Mike, I told you this, but Jason, I'll tell you, I went up to participate in a search for a toddler up in, I don't know, it's like Crystal River or someplace like that, or maybe Brooksville. And 400 people showed up at the gas station. The sheriff was out there trying to yell across the crowd to get people organized. And they didn't have any tools. They had no technology. They were trying to get people to sign up and take pictures of their driver's license, like they were somehow doing a security check on these people. They didn't know where anybody was when they left the gas station, et cetera. And I said, all right, now that I've seen how it works, I know I'm going to go back and I'm going to solve that problem. So I got to work, and that's where when you sign up as a volunteer and that QR code, it brings you into PubSafe, and it puts you in a volunteer status, right? And then as a volunteer, we can track your location for up to 96 hours, and we can track where you have been for 96 hours. So we can actually look to see where people have walked as they're doing these searches to determine what areas got covered and what didn't get covered during a search operation, right? And then we can say, okay, well, we missed this swamp. Let's go back and cover that swamp, and go from there. And you can also message now to all those volunteers. You'd be able to start messaging those volunteers in the field. So, hey, the search is over. We found them. Come on back. Or in the app, they can mark a location where there is maybe they found some evidence, right? And that means that hey, I found a shoe, and here's where it's located. There's no guesswork. They got the GPS coordinates. They can click on it. They can see exactly what it is and where it is and who found it, right? So the search and rescue tracking piece is pretty unique. Any questions on that?
No.
No. So
No, but I like it. It fills a gap of something we didn't really have either. So that's good.
Yeah. So, and this gets into the search parties and the search party tracks and the mapping and stuff like that down here. We do have the ability to do some analytics. This is just like an example. We only have one pending help request here. But at the end of the day, we need to see how well we did, right? And I've got a lot of ideas on analytics, understanding that, hey, we had this many help requests came in, we responded to this many, and we resolved this many. And then how long did it take before we responded? How long did it take us to resolve? What are our metrics so we can look at where we're falling down as an organization and really say, hey, we need to put more emphasis in this area of the response, because now we have some metrics to understand where we did a good job or didn't do a good job, right? And I think with AI, there's a lot of opportunities in the metrics world to really create some really cool stuff. Let's see, damage assessment I brought up. This is the directory where people can fill in their information anywhere in the world. And you just go in here and do a search and try to find the people that are nearby. The company profile stuff. I don't think I need to show you that, but this I did want to show. So we do have the ability to track volunteer hours right through the mobile app. We've got a function there. That's important just because you guys, or NGOs want to justify funding. They want to be able to go out and market and say, hey, look, we put 300 hours into this activity. We put 3,000 hours into this activity. And not only are we saying it, but we documented it with the proof and photos, and we're geolocated from the GPS on our phones. So there's really no chance for us to kind of like beat the system. You have to take the photos when you're registering the information. We don't let you upload photos from your phone. You've got to do it while you're there. So, that's something that almost every NGO needs, but very few have a really good tool to be able to, to take care of that particular piece. All right.
Mike, that opens you up to get grants and things like that, Mike. When you can justify
absolutely.
all these hours, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And then let's see. So you got member management in here. So people join, they get added here. You can invite people with QR codes, email links, SMS messaging, and then they come in. They're kind of in a pending status, and then you've got to go in and approve them, because you'll lose control over the QR code at some point, and you may not know these people. So you can go in and you have to enable them to participate as a member, or they can participate as a volunteer connected to an organization with a lot of different access and rights that go along with that. And then let's see, the last thing I'll point out here is that you can actually create your own events. And when you do that, it actually shows up in the app, and I'll show you that when we get to the app, where if you're going to go out and you're going to do this ruck run, right? You can go in here and create an event for your own ruck run. And this was actually created when the Cajun Navy called me and was asking me about whether or not we could help them with it was a fisherman that was lost in Pensacola Bay. And Todd was telling me about the things that he needed. And I said, no, I can't do that today, but let me take that for action. So we took that for action. And being able to connect to events, whether it be a national event, which we can enter on our side, or if you want to create your own micro event, everything that you do, you can associate with that particular event in the data. And that way you can evaluate data connected to a very particular response, as opposed to this big broad brush look at everything. So, and then you can switch between events inside the mobile app itself.
Did you just add the Hawaii? Did you just add the Hawaii flooding
Yes, I
Today?
added that before I
Today?
got on the call today. Yeah.
They're gonna
Yeah.
get whacked again later today, it looks like too.
Yeah. I didn't realize they were having, is it like a cyclone or something going on, or just,
Yeah, exactly. Just like massive, supposed to be like not inches of rain, but feet
yeah,
of rain.
yeah. And like, the wildfire they had there, terrible. But if you think about, and the other one is the dam breaking in Australia a couple years ago and things like that. If the communities adopt the free app, they can use it as their own localized, alerting system. They don't have to have any funding. They don't have to pay for anything. We've made all that free for people to use because if we can crowdsource that information, NGOs will follow along to get to that information. And then someday down the road, we can then also use that information for analysis of disaster response and better predicting of where things are and what needs to be done, staging of assets. I told you I'm in the GPS business. We've integrated vehicle tracking into here. So if they want to see where every truck is on top of their map, in addition to their users or where they've put generators, they can do all that. So we've got a lot of that type of logistics coordination that's available through the platform. All right. Any questions on the portal? I know it's a lot and I'm moving really fast, but
That's good.
we do offer teams. You can create teams. The number of teams and the size of the team just varies by the level of subscription that you get. Help requests. You guys, if you've responded to any level of a hurricane, everybody's like, can you go do a wellness check on so and so, right? Well, the idea here is people can basically post their own wellness check, like, hey, I'm okay. Family members can connect up. They can look and see what they were doing, where they're going, what their status is. You can request help. We've got routine help and we've got priority help opportunities. And this is what I use to post that other help request. And I'll just show you how this works. We put everything into buckets too, by the way. We don't just let a lot of free form data take place because we want that to be in a database. And then once we get it into a database, we know that we can do things with it, like develop analytics. All of this stuff that you get on social media is very hard to get to, analyze and understand and manage. We can't do comparisons for dispatchers to suggest, the best responder in the area if we don't get the right information from the end user making that request. So but we do have free form comments, so you can put a description in there. And then how long is this going to be active, right? If I got a flat tire, I don't need that to stay on the map for, 4 days. I need it to stay on the map for 3 hours because the problem will get resolved, right? And then that information needs to come off the map because the map would get super cluttered with a lot of activity in a very specific area, right? And then I can get here and I can choose who I want to share this information with. I can share it with the entire community, my active team, just my organization, or I can choose, hey, don't share this with anybody if I'm just doing some testing so it doesn't actually broadcast out to other people in the area.